there's been some interesting anecdotal reports of increased muscle mass, great deep delta wave sleep, thicker hair, better younger skin. But the main thing is an overall better mood. So let's do this. Let's interview Dr. Davis, and then I'm going to roll right into how to make this amazing, highly concentrated probiotic that you can take every night before you go to sleep or take it during the day to help you with whatever you're going through. All right, let's go to Dr. Davis right now. How did you kind of isolate or stumble on this very specific microbe? I mean, there's other microbes, but I think the main one you talk about a lot is the L or Lactobacillus reuteri. So can you tell me a little bit about how you kind of stumbled on that microbe versus other ones?
Well, it was real simple. I make most of my ideas by mistake, by making big blunders. So that's how I came to the wheat belly idea, trying to minimize the expression of small LDL particles. As you know, the real cause for heart disease, not this nonsense about LDL cholesterol. So I saw people, you and I have a lot of success in helping people regain health. And so with wheat, grain, and grain elimination, sugar elimination, and a handful of common nutrients that are lacking in modern life, and we see all kinds of wonderful things like a reversal of type 2 diabetes, loss of fatty liver, weight loss, etc. But it was clear that was incomplete. Even when I added some basic microbiome strategies like a high-potency multi-species probiotic or prebiotic fibers and fermented foods, I still saw some residual problems. For instance, somebody says, my rheumatoid arthritis is much better. I got rid of the biologic injections. I got rid of the prednisone, but I'm still taking naproxen as needed for occasional mild flare-ups. Why? So I looked for what else there was. And I started thinking about the hormone oxytocin. I don't even remember why. There's a really crazy set of Frankenstein experiments being conducted by a woman named Irina Conboy. She's been at Harvard, Stanford. I think she's now at UC Berkeley. And she did something really creepy. They took an old rat and cloned it so that they got a young rat that was immunologically and genetically identical, and then connected their circulatory systems. Yuck. Well, then they called it heterochronic parabiosis, 2 times next to life. Well, lo and behold, the old rat becomes young. And so they asked, well, what are the mediators? That work is ongoing. But the first mediator they isolated, there are a bunch of peptides. The first mediator that they isolated was oxytocin, what people regard as the hormone of love and empathy, what some ladies regard as the drug they get to induce labor when they're pregnant at term pregnancy. Well, then an MIT group, a cancer group, were exploring the anti-cancer effects of Lactobacillus reuteri, and they discovered all kinds of unexpected effects. The first thing they observed was that their fur, in their words, became rich and luxurious.
Wow.
So they started doing all kinds of crazy things to these mice, like inflicting wounds in their skin, and watched healing time cut by half. They watched old mice become young again. So, for instance, if you look at muscle that's atrophied in older mice, young muscle cells come back. Their libido, their mating behavior comes back. The immune system is amplified. In other words, it changed. They even did this. They did a crazy study. They gave 2 groups of mice a lousy diet, purposefully, meant to mimic fast food. The mice that got just fast food got fat and old and lost their hair, stopped mating. They got old and died. The mice who got the same crappy diet, but with reuteri, stayed slender, rich fur, mated. They stayed young until death.
So this experiment with the mice, I think that was the missing point. They gave them a certain microbe, L. reuteri, because of oxytocin. They wanted to increase it.
They did, but they didn't set out to do just that. They kind of stumbled on that. So like a lot of things I do, a lot of this was by accident. So they wanted to understand, first of all, why that rich, luxuriant fur issue. And it became clear they opened a whole Pandora's box of effects. Well, I got that same microbe. It was available commercially from a Swedish company, but it was available as tablets for infants, so very teensy-weensy doses. So I simply reasoned, let's ferment it as something that looks like yogurt, but we're going to ferment it using prolonged fermentation. So reuteri will, as you recall, microbes don't have sex. There's no mommy, daddy, male, female microbe. They just double. So reuteri doubles every 3 hours at human body temperature. So I made yogurt. It's not yogurt, of course. It looks and smells like yogurt, but I used prolonged fermentation. I allowed 12 doublings. I performed something called flow cytometry, just a way to count microbes. And we get 300 billion. So far more, about 1,000-fold more than the original tablets for babies. I just started talking about it. Gave to all my neighbors. I started eating it.
Okay, so the question I have is, so when you did you initially know how to do that, or you just go, okay, let me try something, and well, I guess that didn't work. How did you know to ferment it for 36 hours?
Hit and miss.
Okay.
And then I did repeated flow cytometry counts. It became clear the number I first picked, 36 hours, was the sweet spot. That's where you get maximum number, at least as yogurt. And if you go to 48 hours, you get a plateau. You actually get an increase in dead microbes. So 36 hours, which, by the way, is very different than what they do in commercial yogurt making, which is 6 to 12 hours.
It's ridiculous. I guess the reason, at first, did you think, well, I think we'll just take this microbe as a supplement, right? Were you thinking at first, like, oh, we'll just take it and it'll work just by taking it?
You know, you can, but the quantity of, in the original product, which called BioGaia Gastrus, Gastrus, the infant tablets. So when you take it, nothing happens. When I called the company, I talked to the exec. I said, hey, I'm playing with this your tablet's making yogurt. They said, you can't. No one's ever made yogurt from it. And they said, we don't know anything about that MIT nonsense. Don't call us again. They essentially shut it all down. So I said, okay, fine. So I made the yogurt, and now we have thousands and thousands of people doing it. And the crazy thing is, so as elegant as that MIT work was, we're learning new lessons, both from human experience and some limited efforts in clinical trials. We're seeing all kinds of things happen. But you know what? As you know, usually when you see stuff happen in mice, it's usually not corroborated in humans. It falls apart. In this instance, to my great surprise, everything seen in mice has proven true in humans. Wow. So we see a restoration of youthful musculature, an increase in strength. Guys, older guys over 50, get about a 50% rise in testosterone. Older ladies get a restoration of vaginal moisture and sensation. There's an increase in libido, which leads to some very embarrassing stories. There is a presumptive increase in the immune responses. People seem to get better faster. There's an acceleration of healing from minor wounds. And I tell this to ladies, and, you know, I'm sure your audience is a lot like mine. My audience is 87% female. And they all say this to me, incredibly. They say, oh, we don't care about muscle and the immune response. We just want better skin. I said, what? All right, fine. So I did a little clinical trial on ladies, big ladies. I said, don't change your diet. Don't change your exercise program. Just take these. That was reuteri. I added some other things to amplify the skin effects, collagen peptides, hyaluronic acid, and the carotenoid astaxanthin. And we did high-resolution skin ultrasound, and we showed a big increase in dermal thickness. Ladies are thrilled because they lose their crow's feet and their smile lines, blah, blah, blah. Wow. But I happen to measure the waist circumference. It's free. You know, you and I don't have the budget of pharma. We don't have billions of dollars to spend. We have maybe tens or hundreds of thousands of dollars to spend in our clinical trials. So I measured waist circumference. It's free. And to my great surprise, this was Christmas Eve, I get the waist circumference. I said, no way. They lost huge amount of waist circumference, up to 8.5 inches. No change in diet. Even more remarkably, they didn't lose weight. Well, how can that be? Well, I think consistent with the animal evidence and what I'm seeing anecdotally play out in thousands of people is you lose abdominal fat, but you restore youthful muscle. We're seeing that play out. So I think what I stumbled on by accident is a way to shift body composition. The complete opposite, by the way, of these garbage GLP-1 agonist drugs. Yeah. That, of course, cause huge loss of muscle, guarantees weight regain. So if a person has a choice, stop the drug and see your health deteriorate when you regain all the weight as fat, or stay on the drug forever and be held hostage by the pharmaceutical industries. So I think
even one of your videos, you mentioned you personally gained how much muscle mass?
So in my 60s, I gained about 13 pounds of muscle and my strength increased by 50%. And you know, I mentioned to you in emails, I hate going to the gym. I can't stand it.
Right.
So I go 15 minutes on a busy week. I go 15 minutes once a week. I haven't been to the gym in 5 months, by the way, but I do other things. But so that's what I'm seeing. Now, I don't know if that happens to everybody. I do see ladies, they get mad at me. They say, hey, I'm doing your program in the reuteri and I gained 8 pounds. I asked them, have you looked in the mirror? Have you measured your waist? They said, well, yeah, my waist is smaller. My shoulders are firmer. My thighs and buttocks and neck are firmer. So presumptively, we got to do this more formally, like do a DEXA study or something like that to formally quantify the shift in muscle and all that business. But, all we're doing, though, right, is replacing things that you should have had in your body all along. Everyone's supposed to.
So I just wanted to stop at that one point. Okay, so this microbe, obviously, we were supposed to have it initially, and I'm guessing some past antibiotic wiped it out, or bad food, or something. And I think you mentioned even in your book or another video that what percentage of the population just doesn't have this microbe anymore?
About 96%.
Gosh.
So it is very susceptible, as are many lactobacilli, to common antibiotics. So if you took amoxicillin 30 years ago for an upper respiratory infection, wiped out all your reuteri. What's so fascinating about that is if we sequence the microbiomes of somebody living in the highlands of New Guinea or the Brazilian rainforest and the Amazon, people unexposed to antibiotics, etc., they all have reuteri. They all have it. If we sequence wild mammals like deer or giraffes or lions, they all have reuteri, suggesting it's necessary for mammalian health. It's us who've lost it. The original discoverer, Dr. Gerhard Reuter, said it was everywhere in the 1960s. He got it from the breast milk of a German breastfeeding mom, and he found it in stool and other body fluids. Over his 40-year academic career, he found it increasingly difficult to find it. It started to disappear. And since then, that's been corroborated. It's virtually disappeared from the human microbiome. And I think that's why we're seeing such over-the-top effects, restoring something people have lost and doing so at very high counts.
Wow. So then what happens, you lose this microbe, which also, by the way, tends to protect against small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, right? It does a lot of things in the small intestine too. And then it probably, because it's not there, then you start getting this invasion from the large intestine climbing up to the small intestine. Is that what happens too sometimes?
Yeah, exactly, yes. So loss of those beneficial species, this species of lactobacillus and others, allow the overproliferation of proteobacteria, fecal microbes like E. coli and Klebsiella that have taken up residence in virtually half the U.S. population. So it's probably the worst epidemic to ever occur in our species. And there's science behind that. But so we have 24 feet of small intestine infested by fecal microbes. Now, as you recall, the small intestine is very permeable. That's where we absorb nutrients. So when those microbes that live and die over just a period of a few hours, they don't live very long, they release some of the components of their cell walls, such as the endotoxin component. And that gains access to your bloodstream. That's called endotoxemia, of course, and that's a major driver of weight gain, dementia. It's probably one of the most important factors causing multiple forms of cancer, type 2 diabetes, cognitive impairment. So in other words, it's going to cause us to reconsider virtually all human disease in light of the contribution, initiation, or exacerbation of endotoxemia. Now,
so just on the topic of endotoxemia, so there's somehow some of these bad microbes, these pathogens, they either leak off or release something negative about that then forms this infection that gets into the bloodstream that starts creating a cascade of bad effects?
Yes. So, people have suspected this issue of gut leak for many decades, but it finally got corroborated by Patrice Canny and his Belgian group in 2007. And since corroborated numerous times since, it is a major driver. It terrifies me to think how we didn't know about this thing. The great thing about reuteri is, so most microbes colonize the colon only.
Right. The large intestine, yeah.
The reuteri colonize the 24 feet of small intestine and the colon.
Wow.
Where it takes up residence and does something wonderful. It produces what are called bacteriocins, natural antibiotics effective against fecal microbes. So the loss of reuteri probably was a big part of the reason why this happened. And restoring reuteri is a big part of the solution to correct that problem. So we're seeing SIBO recede via normalization of breath hydrogen gas with restoration of Lactobacillus reuteri, but I've combined it with Lactobacillus gasseri because that's another big bacteriocin producer and small intestinal colonizer. And then we've thrown in a strain of Bacillus subtilis or subtilis because of its extraordinary bacteriocin. And so far, making yogurt, out of those three, we get about 90% normalization of breath hydrogen gas and all the wonderful effects that accompany that. Weight loss plateaus are broken, hemoglobin A1C finally goes below 5. All that kind of great stuff happens just by restoring these keystone, what I think are keystone microbes, via something that looks and smells like yogurt.
And also your sleep, right?
And I'm a chronic insomniac. Terrible. for decades. With reuteri, I sleep wonderfully. Not everybody gets that. Maybe half the people get that. And by the way, there's some other microbes that have magnificent effects on sleep. Another one is Lactobacillus casei shirota strain. That's available as this goofy little product called Yakult. It's an awful little product. It's skim milk and sugar, but it's a good source of that microbe. And so as a chronic insomniac, I take the reuteri, sleeping 8-9 hours straight through rare awakenings. I add the casei shirota as yogurt, and I sleep 12 hours a night. I had to stop it because it was so overwhelming. That it varies among people, but it's and these are effects not yet described in the scientific literature. So because we're experiencing it on a large scale.
You stumbled on something that's so fascinating to me because I'm into the farming and the soil and the microbes. This is all human body stuff. I definitely want to stay connected and keep picking your brain. But so there's a book that I highly recommend everyone go out and get. It's Super Gut. And also I'm going to put your website down below. And you also have a course. I'll put some information about what the specific microbe that you recommend, because there's different strains. And you figured out the right strains, so that's going to be really key to get that. I'll put that link down below. But wow, this is huge. I'm so interested in this topic. I'm just blown away. But anyway, I wanted to just pull you on and not take too much of your time, but I want to thank you for that data. And also I'll just going to roll right into next how to make this if someone wants to make it. And if they want details, they can go to your blog site. How about that?
Terrific. Yeah. One of my interests is this is all happening, right?
Yeah.
At a time of record social isolation,
right.
Divorce, suicide is at record levels, 36% increase between 2000 and 2020. And I did not know this. The psychology community has been formally measuring and tabulating the rise of narcissistic behavior. And that curve looks like this, 45-degree incline. So now we have a way, perhaps, we can't address all social ills, of course, with yogurt, but perhaps we can have an impact because of the restoration. What I'm seeing is a restoration of the intensity of love and affection for other people, desire for human companionship, increase in generosity, and the acceptance of other people's opinions. So that's my goal in doing all this. I think we can change human behavior in a good way.
I can get behind that. That's awesome. Well done. Thank you so much.